Hi guys, so today we're looking at this AIWA AD-F810 stereo cassette deck. This is a 3-head deck and it's a closed loop dual capstan deck, which is, I've explained this in one of my other videos. The closed loop dual capstan are generally the better sounding decks, the better quality decks, and do that because the tape is stable across the tape head. Now, all the decks I've seen apart from AIWA say closed loop dual capstan, but AIWA call it super stabilized tension dual capstan, which essentially is the same thing. It's stabilizing the tape due to tension across the playhead. So the tape is very slightly stretched across the playhead. The capstan on the right hand side is spinning faster than the capstan on the left hand side, and they both pinch the tape, so it pulls the tape tight across that tape head. So yeah, I would call it the super stabilized tension dual capstan, but it's the same as the closed loop dual capstan that you see on all of the other cassette decks. Now, one interesting point about this particular deck, 3-head cassette decks, they have an ability to change the bias on the tapes, and that is how well that it records the low frequencies and the high frequencies, and that changes depending on what tape you put in, a normal tape, a chrome tape, a metal tape, but can also be different between same batches of tapes. So if you get a bunch of metal cassettes, they will all perform slightly differently, and you would adjust the bias to suit your needs and get that playback the way you want it to. Now, this particular deck doesn't have an auto calibrate function. A lot of 3-head cassette decks, you push the calibrate button, it will record a bit of tape with the 2 test tones, normally 400 Hertz and 10 kilohertz. Then it'll rewind, it'll play it back and listen to it, and it will then make changes depending on what that playback was. Now, this particular one doesn't have an auto calibrate, it's just the manual ones. So you have record sensitivity, record balance, and then the all-important bias fine adjust. Now, you're going blind a little bit on most cassette decks where they're manual. You basically just turn this, press the monitor button. So the monitor, you play back the source recording and actually what the tape has just recorded, and you listen to the two. You basically just press this button, listen to the source, listen to the tape, and then adjust it slightly, listen to the source, listen to the tape, until you get it right, until you get it how you want it. It's a very personal choice as well. But this particular deck has this graphic on the top here. I'll put it up on the screen so you can see it. And I've never really understood exactly how this is, but it looks as though it's giving you the bias position of this dial depending upon which tape you put in. So if we look at the top one there, which is Memorex High Bias 2, that is a chrome cassette because you can see that the little box is half filled in. It says that the key for that next to that diagram, it says it's chrome. But then on the bias dial itself, you can see that the white areas, that I assume because the Memorex writing is in white, that you are indicating that it needs to be in the white portion of this dial, which is sort of the very start of the dial and the very end of the dial, because they're the white ones if you look at that logo. Again, it's a bit confusing, I think, but does that mean that all of the white ones, depending, it says there the white are, there's some ferro ones in there and there's some chrome ones in there. Does that mean that generally that it needs to be in that sort of area? If you know a little bit more than I do about that, please put it in the comments because I'd like to know. But this, I've seen this sticker on quite a few AIWA 3-head decks, not just this model, and they list out all these tapes. So again, it would indicate that perhaps all the ones in blue, that's the portion of the dial that you should be targeting. And then the yellow ones, it's saying at the top, which is pretty much 0. So maybe it doesn't need as much adjustment. Perhaps the yellow ones are 0 adjustment, The blue ones are, what, maybe 10, -10 and +10. And then the white ones will need the most adjustment, -20, +20. That's how I read it anyway. But anyway, this particular deck, I'm pretty sure it's cassette belts, cassette deck belts. I've not opened it up yet, but if we power it up, put a tape in, what's happening is rewind is working, albeit a bit squeaky, a bit noisy. Fast forward, the same, sounds a bit slow as well. And the play, don't know if you can see there, but the wheels just don't turn and it auto stops. So I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, this is just going to need belts. And I have ordered some belts beforehand. Now this particular deck, I've done belts on this before, and hands down, this is the easiest deck to do belts on. You don't even have to remove this front cover. It does come off, but normally on cassette decks, when you take the mechanism out from inside, you have to take out the actual door as well. So you take off this larger bezel off the outside, it just clips off. I'll show you actually. There we are, they just normally clip off. And then that allows this portion with the cassette deck to be lifted inside the cassette mechanism and taken out of the machine. But this particular one, you don't need to do that. So put that back on. And this should take very little time because, like I said, it's a very easy job to do this. So let's get this open and we'll take a look inside. So I've just lifted the cover off. This is inside. Not really anything to write home about inside. It's a pretty standard cassette mechanism layout. Main board, board for the display and the buttons on the back of the panel. Power supply over there and the cassette mechanism here. Now what makes this a little bit different is the ease of getting this cassette deck mechanism out and getting to the belts as well. Some of the AIWA machines that I've done in the past, I've done videos where it shows the need to desolder solenoids and bits and pieces like that to get into the belts. This one is not like that at all, and even the wiring is easy to disconnect as well. So let's see how I can get this and show you guys the best. Probably there, I would imagine. So I think there's only 4 screws holding that mechanism in. So first of all, let's disconnect the wiring. Two plugs there. There is a ribbon cable on the side here. It just pulls out. This cable I don't think is connected. I think it's just going over the top. So you just need to release the little clamps. And then there's 4 screws. There's 2 at the top. And 2 at the bottom here. Now, I can't remember if you need to take this plastic piece away here. This is just moving this connects the power button at the front to the actual mains power switch down here. But I don't think it needs to come out. Let me just see. There's one more plug at the top, little one. Nope, there's it. Look at that. Like I say, I don't know of any other cassette decks I've worked on where the door is left behind here. It's always comes out with the deck. That's how long did that take? A few minutes. So I can see straight away there's a bit of belt hanging down inside. It's really sticky, as it always is. You can see there's a bit of belt still on the capstan there. So this has, with it being a closed loop dual capstan, you can see that there's 2 capstans and 2 pinch rollers. And these engage both at the same time. So as soon as you press play, these 2 move up, clamp the tape, and like I said, this one spins slightly faster than this one, so it pulls that tape. So between these 2, and this is what it's referring to as the closed loop, it's stretching that tape across here. So the tape is free to wobble from here up to the spool, and from the spool to here, but across the tape head itself, it's nice and tight, and there's no danger of it moving up and down off that head at all. So to get to these belts, we need to remove this retaining plate and the motor off the back. There's 2 belts. There's a belt between the motor and this capstan, or flywheel I should say, on the back of the capstan. So between the motor and the flywheel there's 1 belt, and there's a second belt between this flywheel and a smaller pulley underneath part of this flywheel. But I will show you that. Let me get this plate off. Four screws. And there is our belt, which is turned to just blobs of goo. Very nasty. So I'm going to need to get that off. It's also a bit on the circuit board there, a little bit on the pulley. Whoops, there it is. And yeah, the rest of it, if you can see, it's wrapped around the pulley at the back there. So this is pretty messy. Let me grab something and I will clean all this goo off these rollers, and then we'll come back and we'll put the new belts on. I took out these capstans to clean them properly. They are only held in by these 2 washers, so they're really easy to take out. You just pull these washers off and the capstan slides out, and they are all nice and clean now. It was particularly nasty gooey belts this time. It's all over my fingers, but they are all good and clean. So putting them back is the reverse. Just slide in there like that, and then on the other side, these washers just fit back on. Let's see see which one's which. It's the larger one. So they just push back onto the capstan, slide down, and that holds it in place. Now the belts. So there's a slightly shorter one and a larger one. Can't remember which one's which. Let's start with the shorter one, and I think the shorter one goes around here, so that's basically linking these two wheels together. You can see it's around that larger capstan and around the smaller one. The other belt is to hook the motor pulley up to this larger one. So the easiest way to do this is put the belt around the motor, then around the capstan, like that, and then put the screws back in. They normally clip in quite nicely before the screws. There they are. If you let go of it, if you knocked it, the tension of that belt will put it out of place, so you're best to keep hold of it. Start those screws off. And that's the belts fitted. So you can see how easy this job is. It's not like that with all cassette decks, but if you happen to have one of these or see one of these going cheap because it needs new belts, don't be scared of putting the belts on this, because this is one of the better ones. It's a little bit of, oh, I thought that was a bit of belt goo there. It wasn't, it's just some adhesive. So I'll just give those capstans a little clean before we put it back in. Got some isopropyl alcohol. Just going to turn these capstans around as I do this, just to clean all the way around. So we'll do the heads as well over here. They look quite clean anyway, these ones, but we'll just clean them a little bit as well. Just be gentle. Bit of isopropyl alcohol. Yeah, it's very clean, that one. Let's put it back in, give it a test. That's it, that's all back together. How long did that take? I know I didn't show you the cleaning of the capstans, but the actual tape removal, belt replacement, refit, that's got to be, what, less than 5 minutes. So let's give this a quick test before we put it together. Rewind, fast forward, and play. I've got no speakers attached to this at the minute to listen to it, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. So there you have it, the AIWA AD-F810 belt replacement. Really, really easy on this deck. Hope this has been helpful, and I will see you on the next one.